Malik Deshawn sat in his office on the 28th floor of Bridge and Pine headquarters, where the early March sunlight streamed through the glass, casting shimmering reflections off the walnut desk like ripples on water. 4 unfinished coffee cups sat on the desk, 3 back-to-back meetings and 1 half-read report. But Malik wasn't looking at sales charts or reading glowing testimonials from wealthy customers about the new Seattle branch, or reviewing advertising visuals for the upcoming campaign. He was staring at a single email. The sender's address had no name, just a random string of characters. The subject line was in all caps, no punctuation. "You need to see this." Malik hesitated for a second. He was a CEO, accustomed to complaints, anonymous accusations, unsigned petitions, most of which were baseless or emotionally charged. But something about the way that phrase kept reappearing in his inbox over the past week made it impossible to ignore any longer. He clicked. "Mr. Malik, I don't know if this message will reach you, but if it does, please understand that I write not out of offense, but because I believe you no longer know what's happening downstairs. I am an employee at the Newbridge Market location, the one hailed as the model of the system, with the most beautiful architecture, the wealthiest customers, and also the place where appearances matter more than people. I've seen someone removed from the schedule because their voice wasn't refined enough, sent to the stockroom because of natural curls, flagged in their file for lacking a premium tone in communication. Lighter-skinned staff go to the front, the rest go to the back. Those with the right smile get to stay. The honest ones are labeled unsophisticated. No one dares to speak because anyone who does disappears. But I heard your speech last year. You said, 'I want to build a place where the forgotten can stand beside anyone.' And I wonder, do you know that the very place you dreamed of has now forgotten where you began?" No closing line, no real name, just words cold as a Portland night wind. Malik printed the message and placed it beside 3 other similar emails he'd previously dismissed. The contents weren't identical, but the voice, the pain, felt like it came from the same hand, or at least the same wound. He stared at the phrase, "lacking a premium tone in communication," a term he had never authorized in any employee handbook, yet it now lingered like an unspoken policy. He leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. The city below moved as usual, cars flowing, glass buildings reflecting the sun, well-dressed people hurrying through the plaza. But to him, something had fractured. Not the revenue, but trust. He had spent 20 years building Bridge and Pine from a chain of discount stores into a premium retail brand present in 9 states. He had spoken before thousands, shaken hands with the president, and had once been honored as the first Black man to successfully lead a luxury retail chain in the Pacific Northwest. But that email wasn't about accolades. It was about what he feared most, that his system had begun to automate exclusion, politely, efficiently, without ever needing to raise its voice, and that the people within it were quietly adapting just to survive. He stood up and walked to the wooden cabinet. On the shelf was a photograph from 2007. Malik, then an operations manager, smiling beside Franklin Woods, the first man who taught him how to properly label merchandise. The photo had faded, but their eyes still sparkled. Malik touched the frame, then turned back to his desk, opened the branch directory, and clicked. Newbridge Market, Portland, Oregon. A new window popped up. 98.7% customer satisfaction, record-breaking revenue last month, over 120,000 Instagram followers. Everything was perfect, but the anonymous letters said otherwise, and Malik trusted what couldn't be found in reports. He trusted his gut, the same gut that had carried him through night shifts and being turned away from stores for having skin too dark. The next day, Malik asked his assistant to prepare a fake employee badge under the name J. Carter, a large-size warehouse uniform, and a temporary insurance card. He didn't explain why. He left only one note. "I need to go down there, not to inspect, but to listen." His assistant, Kristen, who knew her boss well, didn't ask further, but her eyes betrayed concern. Because she knew, when Malik Deshawn left the office unannounced, somewhere was about to shake. 2 days later, at a modest hotel near Newbridge's commercial district, a man with worn shoes, a faded denim jacket, freshly dyed brown hair, and black-rimmed glasses stood in front of the bathroom mirror. He shaved clean, changed his hairstyle, and practiced lowering his voice half a tone. On the mirror, he wrote with a felt marker, "Remember who they forgot." Then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a CEO. It wasn't the smile of a wealthy man. It was just the smile of someone preparing to step into the very world he had built, this time unnoticed. The next morning, Jay Carter arrived at the gates of Newbridge Market at exactly 6:45 a.m. Portland's drizzle misted the air. No one else was outside. As he entered the back door marked for staff, a tall white security guard blocked him. "What do you need?" the guard asked, cold and flat. "I'm the new night shift hire. Name's Jay. I was told to come in for training today," Malik replied. The guard looked at the badge, then at the shoes, then at the worn jacket and sniffed. "You've got the wrong door. This one's for internal staff." Malik just smiled. "I think I'm about to be internal." Inside, beyond the glossy shelves and the artfully arranged product lines, was a space that looked perfect, at least on social media. But Malik wasn't there for pictures. He was there to step into the role everyone had forgotten, the one without a voice, with the wrong shoes and the kind of presence the system wasn't designed for. And he knew what he was about to hear would never show up in any report. Jay Carter, or rather Malik Deshawn in his new disguise, was given his first assignment the moment he stepped through the back door of Newbridge Market. Move 14 crates of organic goods from the receiving area to the basement cold storage within 20 minutes. The shift manager, a young man with a buzz cut and AirPods in both ears, didn't bother to introduce himself. He just tossed a clipboard in Malik's direction and walked off. "If you don't make it in time, don't bother coming back tomorrow." Malik didn't react. He took the clipboard, nodded, and started pushing the cart into the elevator. With each step, his worn-down shoes let out faint slaps on the floor, the soles soft and frayed from years of wear. No one here knew that those shoes had once stepped onto a TEDx stage, had walked into the U.S. Secretary of Commerce's boardroom, had stood in closed-door investor meetings in Silicon Valley. But here, in everyone's eyes, they were just the shoes of some low-skilled, middle-aged worker. And because of that, he had already been placed in an invisible drawer, the one labeled visually off-brand. After Malik finished delivering the first batch and returned to the break area, a young female employee, uniform crisp, hair tied in a tight bun, looked at him with visible discomfort. "You're the new guy?" she asked. "Just a tip. Don't wear those shoes on Mondays. They really hate that." Malik tilted his head. "Why?" The girl sighed softly and lowered her voice. "Because they think people like you make the brand look cheap." Then she turned away. Malik didn't press. He didn't need her name. He already knew the fear she carried. That afternoon, he was assigned to the parking lot to help load groceries for customers. Portland's chill cut through his old shirt, making his joints shiver slightly. But he bent down anyway, opening trunks, stacking bags carefully, just like he had done back in 2004. A middle-aged couple pulled up in a white Tesla and waved him over. The woman didn't look at his face, just motioned with her hands. "Don't place the bags like that. The logo needs to face out. It ruins the premium feel otherwise." Malik smiled gently and adjusted the bags. The man beside her asked, "Are you local?" "Your accent's different," Malik replied. "I've lived in a few places, most recently Detroit." The man nodded. "Detroit, huh? That's surprising. Don't usually see folks like you working here." Malik didn't ask what folks like you meant. He already knew, and he wasn't the only one who did. During that shift, Malik noticed at least 5 other employees of color, 3 in the stockroom, 1 cleaning the restroom, and 1 whose face he never saw because they worked the night shift. None of them were stationed at the front desk, cashier stands, or customer service zones. Those brightly lit areas where the cameras were perfectly positioned, and staff spoke smoothly, smiled just right, their eyes neither too direct nor too evasive. After the break, Malik returned to the stockroom and saw a young Asian employee, about 20, being scolded by a woman in a light gray suit, her straight brown hair parted precisely in the middle. A look so meticulously curated, it bordered on artificial. It was Malik's first time seeing Tessa Callahan, the regional manager, known as the architect of premium customer experience at Newbridge. Her voice was cold as marble. How many times do I have to say it? No highlights. You look like you're going clubbing, not working. The employee hung his head. Malik stood silently behind a crate, not interfering. When Tessa walked away, he approached quietly and asked, "You okay?" The young man shook his head. "It's fine. I'm quitting soon anyway. My mom says I shouldn't work at a place where keeping your hair color matters more than keeping your dignity." Malik tightened the strap on his work gloves, saying nothing. He couldn't step in, not yet, but the puzzle pieces were beginning to fit. That evening, as he left the store, Malik paused for a few minutes in front of the employee bulletin board near the back hallway. In bold letters, it read, "Dress for the experience you're selling." Below that was a color-coded chart outlining uniform colors by rank, from navy and gold for senior management to gray basic for back-end staff. There was no mention of competence, tenure, or communication skills, just colors and appearance. And Malik understood. The shoes he wore, despite having walked the halls of American power, represented only gray basic here. That night at the hotel, he took off his shoes, placed them on the table, and stared at them for a long time. He remembered 2011, signing the first branch deal with an investment fund, wearing those exact shoes. He once believed they symbolized his journey, his extraordinary effort, the heights he'd reached. But at Newbridge, they had become proof that he didn't belong, and that made them the perfect lens through which he could see the system he had built. Not through speeches, but through the cold stare of a security guard, the hushed advice of a young employee, and the chilling silence in the break room where no one dared speak the truth aloud. And Malik knew, tomorrow he wouldn't change his shoes, because the wrong shoes were exactly what made him the right man to see it all. If Malik Deshawn had ever believed that discrimination in modern retail had been replaced by professionalism and standardization, the first 2 days at Newbridge shattered that belief into pieces. Newbridge Market wasn't like the other Bridge and Pine branches. It didn't feel like a store. It felt like a meticulously designed stage, where lighting, colors, and even people were curated like props in a performance called Premium Customer Experience. And in that performance, people like Jay Carter, with worn shoes, dark skin, and a raspy voice, had no role. On Tuesday morning, Malik entered the employee break room to grab his first cup of coffee. The room was tucked behind the administrative offices, far from the customer-facing areas. On the wall was a whiteboard where one might usually find shared announcements or staff notes. But this board had only one neatly written line in black marker with a red border. "Look clean. Talk clean. Be clean." Below that, in smaller text, "Brand first, feelings later." No signature. No one dared remove it, and no one dared write anything else. As Malik poured his coffee, a slender middle-aged woman in a light gray uniform quietly nodded at him. Malik asked softly, "Been working here long?" She simply replied, 8 years. He followed up, "Ever feel like the vibe here is off?" She let out a faint smile, not one of joy, but the kind worn by someone who once tried to speak and later learned silence was survival. "This place isn't a supermarket, it's a museum, and we're the ones who dust the glass." That day's shift began with Malik assigned to assist the shelf arrangement team. But as he stepped into the central display area, where luxury items gleamed under cold white lights between French imported wooden shelves, a familiar female voice snapped, "Jay, what are you doing here?" Tessa Callahan stood a few steps away, arms crossed, eyes scanning his shoes. Malik responded politely, "I was assigned to assist the display team this morning." Tessa shook her head and turned to an assistant. "What's the policy? Anyone who doesn't meet appearance standards can't be in Zone A1, right?" The assistant nodded. Malik stayed silent. He didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. Tessa gave him one final scan, then coldly ordered, "Reassign him to receiving. Now." She walked away like she'd just removed an out-of-place object from a shelf. Malik returned to the stockroom, heavy-hearted, not because of the reassignment, but because he was beginning to see the invisible hierarchy embedded in this place. At Newbridge, what you did mattered less than how you looked, and those who decided what looked right sat quietly above, people he once believed were on his side. Mid-shift, Malik was called into a side room for a cultural orientation session. A trainer, blonde, wearing a polo with the company logo, stood in front of a slide deck titled The Bridge and Pine Aesthetic. The 30-minute presentation included lines like, "Premium customers don't want to see disorder, even in attitude," and "If you're not radiating positivity, you're breaking the experience we're building." Malik scanned the room. No one asked questions. No one smiled. A few employees of color sat with heads down, taking no notes. He couldn't tell if they were bored, afraid, or emotionally numb. After the session, he walked past the front reception area, where staff wore navy and gold uniforms, hair perfectly styled, and faces glowing as if fresh from a spa. He saw a Latinx employee standing quietly at the far end of the counter, eyes fixed on the floor, while a white female coworker received praise from a customer for being so pleasant to talk to. Same answer, same message, but the tone was different, and the gaze that received it was different too. That evening, Malik sneaked back into the admin wing to retrieve more materials from the shared mailbox. As he passed the management office, he noticed the lights were still on. Through the glass wall, he saw Tessa in a meeting with a small group, all shift managers, supervisors, and image auditors. On the projector screen was a list of names. Next to each name were short notes. Slight speech impediment, southern accent, unprocessed hair, image not up to standard, recommend position change. Malik pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the screen. His heart pounded. This wasn't an official handbook. This was a covert classification system built on bias, executed silently under the label of brand standards. That night in the hotel, Malik sat alone, scrolling through the photos on his phone. Not product photos, not sales charts, but photos of the list, where people had been reduced to comments. He remembered the woman's words from that morning. "This place isn't a supermarket, it's a museum." And he thought to himself, if this is a museum, then who's on display and who's being hidden? The next morning, Malik stepped into Newbridge's back door, wearing the same worn shoes. A young employee walked past, paused, glanced down, and softly said, "I like your shoes." Malik smiled lightly. "Thanks. They don't really fit the place." The young man shrugged. "Maybe what doesn't fit is the place," then walked on. Malik knew the truth was leaking through the cracks of this polished system, and he was ready to follow it all the way down. Malik Deshawn once believed that the only things that could get someone fired mid-shift were serious infractions: stealing, disrespecting customers, or walking off the job without notice. But at Newbridge, what they called violations took on an entirely different form. They weren't based on behavior, but on shirt color, hairstyle, and the exact shade of a smile. And he saw it all unfold firsthand on an otherwise harmless Wednesday morning, in a moment that shifted everything in just 15 seconds. The morning briefing was short, as usual, held just before opening hours. The shift manager, a woman of Irish descent named Margaret, stood in front of the bulletin board, listing the day's standards for signature experience: polish the glass every 2 hours, tie uniform scarves with precise folds, double-check the citrus diffuser in the premium fruit section. No one objected. No one asked why the fruit section had to smell like Valencia oranges instead of American ones. Everyone had grown too used to this strange brand of control. So strange it bordered on absurd, yet it was accepted as standard. After the meeting, an employee named Christoph, small frame, deep voice, possibly of Hungarian background, walked out with an optimistic smile, only to be called back minutes later by none other than Tessa Callahan. She pointed at Christoph's light brown shirt and loudly declared in front of the entire checkout area, "What are you wearing?" How many times do I have to say it? Wednesdays are for navy pallets. That brown makes the whole counter look like a discount warehouse. Christoph stammered, "I washed all my navy shirts yesterday. Didn't have time to dry one this morning." Tessa didn't respond. She turned to Margaret and said, "Send him home. Strike him from the evening shift." Christoph didn't even have time to react before Margaret nodded. It all happened in under 30 seconds. Malik stood not far away, a box in hand, blending into the invisible background. He couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. An employee removed from the shift, not for laziness, not for incompetence, but for a shirt color. But what haunted him more than Tessa's decision was the silence that followed. No one spoke. No one reacted. Even Christoph, stunned for a second, just nodded, forced a faint smile, and stepped back as if he had committed some unpardonable sin. A sin committed by a still damp shirt. That afternoon, Malik cautiously brought it up to Margaret in the break room. He chose his words carefully. Christoph seemed like a solid worker. Getting sent home over a shirt color feels a bit harsh, doesn't it? Margaret simply shook her head. Jay, you're new, so you don't understand. Tessa is very clear. Image is key. Customers pay for a premium experience, and that starts with color palettes. One person off-brand drags down the entire atmosphere. He wasn't fired, just not scheduled today. If they really cared, they wouldn't let it happen. Malik didn't answer. In his mind, the phrase echoed, if they really cared. He knew the system wasn't built to care. It was built to assess. And anyone who didn't fit the frame was cropped out of the picture. That evening, he was tasked with restocking the Belgian almond pastry display, an expensive item typically pre-ordered by high-end clientele. While Malik carefully aligned the boxes by label order, another employee, Ruby, approached and whispered, "You're doing too good a job. Be careful." Malik raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ruby glanced toward a nearby camera. "Here, being too good can get you in trouble. If you outshine the person they've assigned to this section, you'll get reassigned." Malik narrowed his eyes. "I thought high performance was encouraged." Ruby gave a faint, sad smile. "Performance is encouraged, only if it comes from the right person." Their conversation ended when Ruby was called back over the intercom. Malik stood alone among rows of premium cookies, reflecting on something an economics professor once told him. Any system that gets too polished eventually becomes a tool for exclusion. He had never imagined it would apply to the very organization he built. That night, back at the hotel, Malik opened his laptop and added a new note. The first line he typed read, "At Newbridge, image matters more than people. Integrity is optional. Image is law." Then he opened the anonymous email again and reread every line. This time he lingered on the final sentence. "Do you know that the place you created is now a place with no room for people who used to look like you?" Malik didn't just know. He was living it, wearing the same old shoes that had walked him through every milestone, now being pushed off the sales floor like an item that didn't match the aesthetic. Watching the philosophy he once preached, everyone belongs, twist into only the curated belong. And he decided, tomorrow he wouldn't just observe. He would start asking questions, not to challenge, but to see if anyone still dared to answer. The downstairs break room at Newbridge Market looked like something out of a showroom kitchen. White walls, gray tile floors, a stainless steel fridge, and pastel-colored molded plastic chairs neatly arranged beneath cold LED lights. Everything was bright, clean, and so flawless it felt sterile. There was no staff bulletin board, no cheerful greetings, no employee photos, just a shift schedule taped up with clear adhesive, updated each morning and removed each night, as if no one had ever been there. And yet, in that cold and quiet space, on Thursday morning, Malik heard something he hadn't encountered since this journey began. Real voices, speaking real truths, unfiltered. Malik entered the break room at 10:47, just after finishing his shift moving food crates to cold storage. He took a seat in the corner, near the hot water dispenser, poured himself a cup of tea, and sat silently. A few minutes later, 3 other employees walked in, an Asian man in a faded jacket, a brown-skinned woman with tightly braided hair, and an older white man with sun-hardened lines etched into his face. No one spoke at first. They grabbed their food, reheated lunch containers, turned on soft lo-fi music on a portable speaker. Then, as if responding to some unspoken signal, the older man spoke. "Christoph's name was wiped from the system yesterday. I checked the schedule this morning. He's gone." The woman sighed. "All because of that brown shirt. Folks like us always take the hardest hits." The Asian man shook his head and said softly, "I once got penalized for mispronouncing the word quinoa." A customer laughed. I was too scared to apologize. Ever since, I don't say dish names. I just point at the shelf. Malik sat quietly, listening intently. None of the three knew who he really was. To them, he was Jay Carter, the quiet new warehouse guy who never complained. And that was exactly why they opened up. Here there were no bosses, no cameras, no fear of attitude scores. Just three people used to enduring, and one man relearning how to listen. The woman, her name was Nia, continued, I got promoted to floor coordinator once, but only for a week. One day I laughed too loudly while chatting with a customer from Kenya, and Tessa said my volume didn't fit the luxury atmosphere. The next week I was back in storage. No one explained, but I got it. I wasn't the type they wanted customers to see. Malik turned to her. Did you ever report it? Nia scoffed. Report to who? HR sits right above Tessa's office. Everybody knows they have lunch together every week. The older man, Dennis, cut in. I used to be a stock manager at the Eugene branch. When Newbridge opened, I transferred to be closer to home. They demoted me to freight handler because this branch needed a younger, more energetic image. I was 48, not young enough, not energetic enough. But I still carry 20-kilo wine crates, no problem. Malik looked at Dennis for a long moment, not because of what he said, but because of the way he said it, that mix of fatigue and resignation. It sounded just like his father, the day he was laid off from the packing plant for being obsolete in the new tech age. Nia pointed up at the schedule on the wall. See that? White folks at reception, brown folks in the back, pretty faces get customer service. The rest? Night shifts, split shifts, no fixed hours, no control, no name on the Employee of the Month board. The Asian man, his name was Fuck, added, even the performance board isn't public. Only the right fit gets to see it. For the rest, the message is simple. Be silent, work hard, and stay unnoticed. Malik remained still. His tea had gone cold without him realizing it. He didn't need to ask any more questions. He had enough. More importantly, he now knew that his job wasn't just to gather evidence. It was to find out how many others were carrying stories no one had ever heard. That afternoon during his shift, he returned to the archive room to search for older schedules. In an unlocked cabinet, he found a folder containing internal staff rankings. The first page read, Preferred Image Employees. The list included names, photos, and remarks like luxury smile, spa-grade hair, engagement ideal for Zone B. The second list was labeled Support Staff, Limited Visibility. No photos, just names, with notes like Best Kept in Back of House Rolls. Malik quietly pulled out his phone and photographed each page. His hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from the chill of realization. The company he built was no longer an organization. It had become a filtration system, sophisticated, quiet, and disturbingly legal. That night back at the hotel, Malik reopened the first anonymous email. He read the last line once more. We don't need you to fix everything. We just want to be heard. Once, and Malik whispered, as if making a promise, I hear you now. By his 6th day undercover as Jay Carter, Malik Deshawn no longer felt like a man pretending. He had become part of the invisible fabric of the system, a non-essential atom, never invited, but positioned perfectly to see what others had learned to look past. The stories from the break room still echoed in his mind as he received his next assignment. Help unload delivery trucks at 5 a.m., a time no preferred image employee ever had to report. Portland was still fogged in, the early wind sharp against his sleeves, but Malik didn't feel cold. Something else was burning inside him now, the slow, rising fire of a man who no longer wanted to stay quiet. His work partner was a young man named Ramon, Latinx, in his 20s, soft-spoken, eyes always fixed on the ground whenever someone in a navy blue shirt walked by. While lifting crates onto the conveyor belt, Ramon accidentally dropped a can of condensed milk onto the concrete. Malik caught it in time. It didn't break, no harm done. But at that exact moment, Tessa Callahan appeared in the hallway corner, as if summoned by fear itself. You there? Stop. Both of you. Her voice rang like an alarm bell. Ramon froze, ready to explain, But Tessa was already storming over, her eyes cutting through Malik as if he didn't exist. "This is the second time I've seen you drop something," she said to Ramon. "You're being moved to sub-receiving. No more appearances in the front area." Ramon mumbled, "It was just a slip." Nothing broke, but Tessa was already turning away, muttering just loud enough, "Didn't expect better." Malik couldn't hold back. He stepped forward. "Excuse me, Miss Callahan. I was the one who caught the can. He didn't drop it." Tessa stopped. For the first time, she looked him directly in the eye. There was no anger, just surprise, like a piece of furniture suddenly speaking. "Jay, right? I remember. You work in the back. Not here to weigh in on management decisions." Malik held her gaze. "I'm not weighing in. I'm stating a fact." Tessa pressed her lips together, said nothing, but her eyes said everything. He had just been stamped. Doesn't know his place. That afternoon, Malik's schedule was changed without notice. He was moved from loading docks to sub-storage, a dim, poorly ventilated area where workers operated on temp shifts and had no official break rights. When he arrived, his name had already been changed on the system, from white to gray, a small detail, but anyone in the business knew what it meant. Under watch. Malik understood. His act of speaking up hadn't just painted a target on himself, it had splattered onto those around him. Rosa was one of them. Rosa, a Puerto Rican worker, had been with Newbridge for nearly 2 years. Always on time. Always smiling when customers asked her name. Always quiet when she got stuck with 5 night shifts in a row. But when Malik's shift was changed, Rosa was the only one who said, "That's not fair." The very next day, her schedule was altered too. No one explained. No email came. Her name simply disappeared from the morning shifts, where cash tips were common, and reappeared on the night shifts, where customers were rushed and no one smiled at staff. Malik found her in the spare break room at 4 p.m., packing leftover food into a paper bag, her eyes locked on the table. "What are they doing to you?" he asked. Rosa didn't look up. "I knew they would, but I couldn't stay silent watching you get blamed. I've been quiet for 2 years. One time I speak up, and I lose my right to exist." Malik didn't know what to say. He saw himself in her eyes. Endurance had become a skill, but it was never a choice. Later that evening, during closing time, a little Asian girl, daughter of an employee working overtime, wandered into the loading area. Malik saw her standing in front of the half-closed door, eyes filled with worry. He knelt down and gently asked, "Are you lost, sweetheart?" She nodded. Malik held out a hand. "Let me take you back to your mom. She's at the fish counter, right?" But just as he stepped toward the customer area, a security guard appeared and blocked him. "You're not authorized to escort children through here. Let management handle it," Malik said. "She's just trying to get to her mom. I'm helping." The guard glanced at Malik's uniform and shoes, then replied bluntly, "You're not the right person to walk a child into a service zone." Malik stared at him, voice low and icy. "And what makes you think that?" The guard didn't answer, but Malik didn't need him to. He already knew. That night, back at the hotel, Malik didn't write in his daily log. He simply sat in front of the mirror, staring at his old shoes placed neatly beneath his feet. Then he opened his phone and typed a single question into the Notes app. Who really gets to belong here? Not those with the best skills, not those who work the hardest, not those who've climbed from the bottom, but those who best match a model defined by a select few. Those white enough, those slim enough, those soft-spoken, smile on cue, standing in the right place kind of enough. Those who never flinch when mistreated. And Malik knew he was no longer just a documentarian. He was approaching the edge, the moment when observation must give way to action. But before he crossed it, he needed to witness one last thing. What happens when the last person who knows the truth still chooses silence? On Friday evening, Malik Deshawn, still posing as Jay Carter, didn't clock out at his scheduled time. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't dedication to the cold, plastic-scented, lubricant-streaked world of back-end logistics. It was because he needed to know what happens after hours when the customers are gone, the lights dim, and the supervisors stop policing every detail to protect their so-called premium brand image. Malik stayed late under the guise of volunteering to clean the specialty food packing area. a section typically inspected only on Monday mornings. No one cared what the gray uniformed night shift guy did, as long as he didn't make noise. It was the only time of the week when the system quieted just enough to hear the truth. Around 9 p.m., as most employees had cleared out and the store entered maintenance mode, Malik heard faint footsteps behind the produce display. He slowed, peeked through a mirrored panel, and froze. There, in the soft reflection, was a woman in her 70s. Petite, her silver hair tied neatly at the back, she was gently picking up leftover apples and placing them into a small basket. Not a staff member, not a customer. Malik stepped out of the shadows and spoke softly. "Ma'am, do you need help?" The woman startled but didn't panic. Her eyes just looked tired. "I'm sorry. I know the store's closed, but I couldn't afford the full bag this morning. I thought if there were any left—" Malik interrupted. "You don't need to explain. Which kind do you like? I'll get them for you." She shook her head shyly. "Just a few for breakfast. I used to work here. I'm retired now. I know the smell of spoiled food. I'm not taking anything bad." Malik paused. "You used to work here?" She nodded. "Back in 2009, when this was the pilot location. I worked the organic produce section, but by 2016, they told me I no longer matched the brand energy. I was too old, so I resigned." Malik didn't reply. He didn't know where to begin, how to comfort someone who had once been a cornerstone of the system, now scavenging scraps in a corner no one cared to look at. He picked up her basket and walked inside. Though the store had entered closed mode, the internal locks were still open. He grabbed a fresh produce bag, handpicked each piece, added a premium protein bar, the kind regular staff wouldn't dare buy, and returned. "This is for breakfast, and this is so you don't feel like you have to apologize." She looked at him, eyes pink, not from sudden emotion, but as if she were remembering something long buried, kindness that didn't require a camera. After she left, Malik stood there for a long time, not out of sadness, but because for the first time, he clearly saw the long-term cost of what Tessa had called image refinement. It didn't just exclude those who failed to meet current standards, it erased the memory of those who built the foundation. A good system has memory. Newbridge had none. He returned to the maintenance zone, where security cameras hung from high corners and crossed angles. He looked up, just a curious warehouse worker, and noticed something. The northeast camera wasn't blinking red. The signal light was dead. Could be broken. Could be intentional. But either way, if no one fixed it, everything in that corner, including the elderly woman picking up fruit, would never be recorded. Malik locked it in memory. Location, blind spot, work rhythm, all of it. Back in the break room, changing out of his uniform, Malik ran into Rosa sorting paperwork. She looked exhausted, but when she saw him, her eyes lit slightly. "They cut my hours to 18 a week. No notice. No reason. I guess that's my reward for speaking up." Malik asked, "Do you regret it?" Rosa shook her head. "If I have to apologize for being kind, then I don't belong here." Malik smiled. That line, he would carry it into what came next. That night back at the hotel, Malik didn't write in his usual journal. He just opened his laptop and created a new folder. Stories they didn't think we'd notice. He uploaded the photos he'd taken, added notes about the broken camera, about where the woman stood, about every micro-reaction in that fleeting moment. He didn't write her name, but under value captured, he typed one line. "Kindness can't be tracked, but it always leaves a trace." As he powered down, Malik stared at the old shoes by the chair. Tonight, they had taken him to a blind spot the system had forgotten, and in doing so, they led him back to something the brand culture had long lost: the ability to listen without conditions. Tomorrow, he would begin digging deeper, not just to witness, but to remember on behalf of those forced to forget. Malik Deshawn's 7th day at Newbridge Market began with an internal email sent to all employees. "Brand Refresh Initiative, Appearance Compliance Review begins next week. Any individual not meeting visual standards may be temporarily reassigned for retraining." There was no specific sender, no clear definition of visual standards. But for those who had learned to survive at Newbridge, no explanation was needed. Everyone understood. The soft purge had begun. Malik received a printed copy of the announcement from Margaret, the warehouse shift manager, who wore her usual mask of emotionless efficiency, as if every move she made was pure protocol. "Read this, then sign to confirm you've acknowledged it." Malik took the paper, nodded, and instead of signing, quietly slipped it into his back pocket. He asked for permission to check inventory levels, a reasonable excuse to enter the internal data corridor behind the supervisor's office. This area was normally reserved for administrative staff, but on Saturday morning, none of them were around. The doors were locked with codes, but Malik had overheard a tech mention over lunch that the system hadn't updated passwords since the beginning of the month. He punched in the code. The door clicked open. Inside was a row of filing cabinets, a printer, two wall-mounted screens, and an aging internal server, the kind used to store documents not meant to be emailed company-wide. He opened a drawer labeled Archived Review, 2022 to 2023. Amid a series of neatly organized folders, sorted by location, he found a thick stack printed on heavyweight paper, bound in a gray cover with 4 handwritten red words across the front. Brand score, staff ABC. Malik opened it. The first page listed employee evaluation categories: appropriate communication, walking posture, brand-compatible appearance, neutral accent, luxury vibe. Each scored from 1 to 5. But what chilled him was the final classification system. A, premier image. B, conditional image. C, invisible asset. He flipped through. Below the rubric were names, positions, headshots, side notes. Some names he recognized. Ruby, B, strong demeanor, limited appearance alignment, recommended to avoid front-facing roles. Ramon, C, unconfident tone, personal attire inconsistent with brand aesthetic. Rosa, B, empathetic but emotionally reactive to reassignment. At the back of the packet, a hidden list. Soft removals. Individuals recommended for phased removal from schedules, with no formal record, based solely on detrimental effect on overall brand image. Malik clenched his fist. Not out of shock, but clarity. The time for silence was over. He placed the file on the photocopier, snapped photos of every page with his phone, then returned the documents exactly as he found them. He moved to the server, typed in the phrase, brand consistency. A folder appeared. Inside was a PDF titled Q4 Brand Culture Enforcement Memo. Author, T. Callahan. The first line read, "Image is not a secondary element. It is the first impression a customer receives and the last thing they remember. Staff not meeting standards are blind spots in the experience. They must be redirected or replaced before they dilute brand identity." The final line, "Appearance doesn't say everything, but it decides who gets heard." Malik printed 3 copies, one for safekeeping, one to eventually hand off to corporate HR after the undercover mission, and one for the first person he trusted to understand what was truly happening. That afternoon in the break room, he found Dennis, the older man who had transferred from Eugene, warming up a sandwich. Malik handed him the pages without a word. Dennis read them slowly, his expression shifting from disbelief to simmering rage. "I used to think I was just getting old. Turns out I was getting filtered out." Malik asked, "If you had the chance to speak about this, would you?" Dennis set the pages on the table. "I would, but only if I knew I wouldn't get tossed out the back like spoiled inventory." Malik nodded. He understood. A system only keeps its conscience if the people speaking don't disappear. And to make sure of that, he needed to shine light on what had stayed hidden. That night, Malik created a new folder on his laptop, The Evidence They Can't Deny. He compiled every photo, document, printout, and a snapshot of the Q4 memo. He didn't plan to use it as leverage. He didn't need to. He only needed evidence, clear, undeniable, painful, so that when the moment of reckoning arrived, no one could look away and say, "I didn't know." Malik understood. This list wasn't just a document. It was a map of wounds, sanctioned, systematized, and disguised in elegant language. Brand. But in his heart, a truth rose with clarity. People don't belong in categories, and kindness doesn't need approval. Tomorrow he would speak with the one person who remembered him, not from a list, but from real memory. Because sometimes to expose a system, all it takes is someone who still remembers who you were, before the world decided who you had to be. On Sunday morning, Malik arrived earlier than usual. Portland was draped in a thin mist, like chalk dust clinging to bus windows, in the supermarket's awning. Gone were the Monday rush, the click of supervisor heels, or the upbeat music prepping the store for customers. Only the quiet hum of a floor buffer echoed down the hallway, and the heavy mechanical groan of a maintenance door opening behind the produce section. Malik, still in the role of Jay Carter, carried a box of internal documents he had copied the day before, meant to remain hidden until the right moment. But what he didn't expect was that the first person to see them wouldn't be a director or a senior manager. It was the one man in the building without a company email, without a performance score, without a QR badge to clock in, the janitor named Franklin. Franklin Woods was an older black man, thin frame, slightly hunched back, wind-worn face, and eyes deep as weathered stone. No one knew how long he had worked at Newbridge, only that he always arrived before anyone else, left after everyone else, and spoke just enough to not be forgotten, but never enough to be remembered. He cleaned each aisle like he was wiping down memories, and he never inserted himself into conversations among supervisors. But today, as Malik bent down to pick up a few papers that had slipped from his shirt pocket in the back room, Franklin stood nearby, watching him quietly for a long time. Malik looked up and met his gaze. The older man didn't smile. He wasn't surprised. He simply nodded, then spoke in a voice slow and steady, like a song from long ago. "Detroit, right?" Malik froze. Franklin nodded again, confirming it to himself. "I know those eyes. Winter of 2002. Carson and Dale Warehouse. Snow was thick, and you were the only kid who never complained about hauling water pallets all night." Before Malik could respond, Franklin continued. "You tied your work boots with baling twine because you couldn't afford new laces. And you told me once, 'I don't want to survive. I want to do it right.'" Malik stood motionless, his voice caught in his throat. "You remember that?" Franklin shrugged. "People don't forget those who work in silence. It's only the loud ones that get replaced." Malik sat down on a nearby crate. "I thought I could change everything, but when I came back, I didn't recognize the system I built." Franklin didn't speak right away. He wiped a smudge from a refrigerator handle, then said, "You're not the only one who loses direction at the top. The peak rarely has mirrors." Malik asked softly, "Are you disappointed in me?" Franklin smiled, a wrinkled, warm grin like the first coffee of the day. "Number, I'm proud, because only the real ones come back through the back door." Malik handed him the copied file. Employee classification lists, brand conformity notes, personalized image evaluations. Franklin flipped through a few pages. No shock, no outrage. Just a slow nod, heavy with recognition. "I knew it existed. No title, no signage. But I saw the shift changes with no reason, the schedules that reshuffled overnight, the panic in young folks' eyes when their name disappeared from the board. You don't need documents. You just have to watch how quiet they get." Malik looked at him, as if into a mirror of time. "I don't want to destroy the system. I want to rebuild its memory." Franklin placed a hand on his shoulder. "Memory doesn't live in documents. It lives in the people who keep telling the story. If you're still standing here, it means that memory isn't gone yet." That afternoon, Malik requested reassignment to sub-storage, the place no one paid attention to, but where all information passed through. Inventory logs, shipment schedules, internal notes. He quietly began speaking with each person, Rosa, Dennis, Fook, Nia. Not like a CEO investigating, but as a coworker asking, "When was the last time you felt like you belonged here?" Each had a different answer, but their eyes all shared one thing. That moment had been a long time ago. Too long. That night, back at the hotel, Malik opened his phone and wrote a single sentence in his journal. "A janitor remembered me after 23 years, but the executive board can't see that the soul of this place is rotting by the day." Tomorrow he would no longer be silent. He would appear at the all-staff branch meeting in a form they never expected, not to threaten, not to punish, but to ask one question: what are we building? if the first person who ever laid the foundation is no longer allowed through the front door. Monday morning in Portland wasn't bright, nor was it gloomy. The sunlight simply lay flat over the city, like dust on a painting hung upside down, waiting for something to be revealed. Newbridge Market kicked off Signature Standard Week with a full staff meeting in the third-floor conference room, a space usually reserved for regional audits or internal marketing shoots. All attendees were required to wear formal uniforms, polished black shoes, neatly styled hair, and name badges worn per brand code. Tessa Callahan arrived first, dressed in a white suit, holding a tablet and documents printed on ivory stock. Behind her were 3 regional managers, 2 executive assistants, and a representative from internal communications. No one said it outright, but everyone knew. Today was the unveiling of the faces best suited to represent the brand. Malik, as Jay Carter, wasn't on the invitation list, but he had something else, a still active temporary access badge and an old navy blue suit he'd kept folded in a canvas tote for 3 days. He changed in the walk-in freezer, wiped down his shoes with paper towels, straightened his collar, and pulled from his wallet a silent relic, an analog watch frozen at exactly 9 a.m., the hour he'd signed the founding document of Bridge and Pine 17 years ago. 9:02, the room was packed. Employees stood against walls for lack of chairs. Tessa stepped to the podium, holding up her packet. Thank you all for being here. This week is about realigning the spirit of Newbridge, a place where the experience begins with each individual. We will be selecting a team to represent our next phase of growth, those who truly embody the brand's energy, from communication to appearance. 9:04, Malik entered. No applause, no disruption, just a tall black man in a dark blue suit with a rounded collar, no name tag, no title. Tessa froze mid-sentence, her eyes flickering with vague suspicion. Malik didn't head to the stage. He stood in the back, taking in the room. Just long enough for those who once pointed at his shoes, who once labeled him off-brand, to see him with new eyes. Then he moved forward, slowly. No request to speak, no formal introduction, but each step quieted the room further. At the podium, he pulled from his bag a sheet of paper. No logo, no seal, just a table with 3 headers: name, image classification, reassignment recommendation. And at the bottom, one signature, T. Callahan. He didn't hold it up. He placed it gently on the table, then raised his head. I used to believe that if I built a good environment, good people would naturally belong. I was wrong. A system with no one guarding its ethics will always find a way to rationalize exclusion. He turned to Tessa, now visibly pale. Have you ever imagined what it feels like to be removed from the place you built because your shoes weren't the right color? A murmur stirred. A manager whispered, It can't be." Malik didn't let them wonder longer. He unbuttoned his blazer, took off his glasses, and stepped aside, pointing to himself. The room fell into complete silence. Tessa stepped back, as if to respond, but Malik raised his hand, not to interrupt, but to place a second file on the table, the ABC classification document. This isn't part of any official handbook, but it's more powerful than all your manuals. It doesn't assess skill. It scores resemblance to an imagined ideal, defined by people who've forgotten why this company even exists. He faced the room. I'm not here to fire anyone. I'm here to ask a question. If we keep picking those who look the part and quietly dismissing the people who are the heart of the brand, what exactly will we have left? Rosa stood first. She nodded. No words. Then Dennis. Then Fook. Nia. One by one, the ones who had sat quietly in the back rose to their feet. No chanting, no slogans, just the straight gazes of people whose necks had bowed too long. Malik delivered his closing words. We don't need a face of the brand. We need a collective memory, a place where no one is erased just because they don't please someone else's eye. Tessa began to exit, but Malik called out to her. I'm not firing you, but I request this. If you want to continue working here, you must spend 1 week in the warehouse, in entry-level uniform, without telling anyone you're a manager. If after that week your coworkers still want you back, I'll sign your contract renewal. Tessa didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. As the meeting ended, Malik gave no grand speech, no farewell. He simply retrieved his old shoes, boxed in cardboard, and placed them on the conference table, scrawled across the lid in permanent marker. I wasn't wearing the wrong shoes. I just stepped into the right place. Tomorrow the system would resume, but it would never be the same. On Tuesday, Malik didn't return to the executive office. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't respond to media emails from headquarters or the flurry of inquiries from other branches. Instead, at exactly 5:50 a.m., he showed up at the receiving dock of Newbridge Market in a worn gray uniform, just like every other early shift employee. No navy blazer, no vintage watch, no CEO business card, just the familiar scuffed shoes and a new name tag marked with a single letter, M, not Malik, not Mr. Deshawn, just M, as if he too wanted to erase titles and start from the root. When he entered the break room, there was no applause, no cheers. But the eyes that looked at him were no longer wary, afraid, or measuring. They were the eyes of people who had long been silenced, now seeing someone willing to stand in the shadows with them and not retreat. Rosa, mid-pour at the coffee machine, paused and smiled. Old shoes, still fit. Malik nodded. I walk better in them. Dennis, reading the paper in the corner, looked up. Thought you wouldn't come back. Malik sat beside him, poured himself some tea. I didn't come back because it broke. I came back because it matters. That day, there were no new announcements, no signature week memos, no more ABC classifications. But there was one small change that everyone noticed. The preferred image board had been removed from the admin hallway. In its place, a blank whiteboard. By noon, someone had written in dry erase marker, "We don't rank people. We remember them." Malik hadn't written it, but he read it, and he knew. Newbridge had started to breathe again. That afternoon in the temporary regional office, he met with HR, not to issue punishments, not to fire people, not to name scapegoats. He presented a single proposal: walk-in Fridays, an internal policy mandating that every supervisor, manager, and executive spend one day each month on the front lines, unloading boxes, scanning barcodes, assisting elderly customers, organizing food storage. During that shift, they would be forbidden from stating their job title. No management badges, no privileges, just work. And listen, like anyone else. One HR assistant hesitated. There might be pushback from upper levels. Malik looked at her, calm. That's the point. If someone's afraid of being seen as a regular employee, they're not fit to lead. He signed the policy, then placed a second draft on the table. Staff Narrative Restoration Protocol, a new initiative requiring every branch to collect at least one real story from a frontline employee each week, handwritten, posted in the break room. No photo, no name, just truth. Throughout the day, Malik walked through every department, not to audit, but to be present, helping fold promotional boxes with the stock team, taping a tactile guide back to the wall in the accessibility aisle. Quietly listening to Nia talk about her dream of opening a tea shop. No speeches, no slogans, just presence. Something employees had forgotten to expect from the top. That evening, staff gathered around a small cake on the break room table, brought in by a worker named Juno. In white icing, it read, "To those who stayed, to those who saw, and to those who dared to speak." Malik said nothing. He looked around at the faces once bowed, now raised, at the hands that once trembled under fear of being discarded, now steady around coffee spoons. He knew this wasn't a revolution, it was a reminder that organizations are not built on rating systems or filters. They're built on people, and people can't be categorized like merchandise. As the lights dimmed, Rosa approached and handed him a small box. I found this in the old break room. Don't know whose it was, but I think you should have it. Malik opened it. Inside was a worn plastic name tag, Franklin W. Sanitation. He held it tightly, then nodded. We should never let anyone pack their memories into a trash bin. Tomorrow, Malik would officially send a company-wide memo abolishing all internal image ranking systems, mandating employee evaluations to be based only on skill, conduct, and contribution. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about policy. He was thinking about his shoes, The ones that once got him labeled not good enough. Now, they were the clearest path back to the place he never should have had to leave. Tomorrow, other CEOs might still wear designer shoes. But Malik knew. Sometimes it's the worn ones that lead the way. 2 weeks after Malik Deshawn shed his disguise in the third-floor conference room, Newbridge Market, the once pristine symbol of premium retail, was no longer a place where people whispered to survive. There was no ribbon cutting for a new HR policy, no internal live stream, no teary CEO speech. But something had changed, quietly, deeply, and irreversibly. In the receiving area, employees now wore mismatched sneakers without consequence. No one policed their hair. Regional accents were no longer a reason to be reassigned to the stockroom. The breakroom bulletin board, once used to post shift changes like silent verdicts, was now filled with handwritten thank you notes. Thanks fuck for helping me find my stuff in the rain. Nia, your tea yesterday saved my bad day. Dennis, no one shines floors like you do. Not marketing language, living memory, daily. Outside the checkout counter, a small bamboo plaque had been hung without ceremony. We don't judge you by the shoes you wear, but by the steps you choose to take. No logo, no signature, but everyone knew where it came from. Rosa is now the internal training coordinator, not because Malik appointed her, but because the staff nominated her. Fuck authored a new orientation guide tailored for immigrant workers, translated into 3 languages. Dennis, once just the guy with the mop, was invited to speak at a regional meeting. His voice trembled as he shared, "For the first time, I felt like more than just the man with the broom." And Franklin Woods, the old janitor, no longer cleaned floors on the night shift. He became Newbridge's first ever cultural advisor, a title that had never existed until someone realized it needed to. Each week he sat in the lounge and listened. No clipboard, no metrics, just listening. Because he believed, and Malik believed, that listening is the final asset no system should ever treat as optional. As for Malik, he no longer made regular appearances. After 3 weeks of staying present, he stepped back, not out of boredom, but because he knew, when a system starts to heal itself, the founder must learn to take one step back, so others can step forward. He left behind his name tag marked M in the breakroom locker. No one touched it. It was framed and hung next to the handwritten board with a simple note, "You don't have to be loud to be remembered." That weekend, a group of high school students visited Newbridge as part of a career program. One girl asked Rosa, "How do you know if you belong somewhere?" Rosa thought for a moment, then answered, "When someone stops to listen, not because they have to, but because they truly want to understand." The girl nodded, scribbling it into her notebook, but her eyes lit up, as if she'd just heard something that no textbook had ever dared to teach. And so, a place once built on judgmental glances became one that began with a new kind of look, one of recognition. Sometimes an old pair of shoes doesn't just reflect where you've been, they remind others that you've walked through places they didn't have the courage to step into. And sometimes the quiet ones, like Franklin, like Rosa, maybe even like you, are the ones who keep the whole system from going completely cold. If this story reminded you of someone who's ever been dismissed or overlooked simply for being different, share this video. If you believe kindness doesn't have to wear a designer badge, hit like. If you believe the world needs more stories like this, authentic, emotional, and with a twist that hits home, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment below. Who's the unseen person in your life? Because maybe, from their story, we'll write the next one.